The Radio Planet by Ralph Milne Farley, Chapter 27, last chapter, Peace on Poros. Miles felt a sharp, warm pain in his shoulder, but he still stood erect. He was not dead. Could it be that Yuri had missed? Shaking himself together and blinking his eyes, Miles stared at the prince. The prince stared back with an open-mouthed expression of surprise. His eyes were fish-like. His body was no longer erect. The rifle lay in his lap, and he seemed to be feebly trying to raise it and point it at Kabot. Then, with a gurgle, some blood welled from the prince's mouth and trickled down his chin. With one supreme effort, his antenna radiated the words, "Curse you." Then the rifle dropped, clattering, from his nerveless hands, and his body slouched forward, prone on the floor at the foot of the dais. From the right side of his back there protruded a jeweled hilt of a dagger. Beyond the couch, between parted curtains, stood a wild-eyed Cupian woman, her face hideous with pent-up hate and triumph. For a moment Miles stood rooted to the spot. Then, tearing his feet free, he rushed to his fallen enemy and plucked out the dagger. From the wound there gushed bright, cerise-colored blood, foamy and with white bubbles. Miles turned the body over and listened. At the right side of the chest, not a sound. Then the prince's chest collapsed with a sigh, and a little more blood welled out the mouth, and all was still once more. Prince Yuri, the most highly developed specimen of Cupian manhood, but a renegade, traitor, rejected wooer of the Princess Lilla, pretender to the throne of Cupia. Prince Yuri was dead. And such an ignominious death for one of his high spirit to die, stabbed in the back by a woman? Kabot rose and faced her, the jeweled dagger still in his hand. "Who are you?" he asked. "Why did you do it?" "I am Akapa," she replied in a strained voice. "Akapa from the mountain village of Pronth. Do you remember how in the Second War of Liberation you found Luno Castle deserted and slain infant lying on the royal bier?" "Can I ever forget it?" he answered, his mind going back into the past. "Naturally, I thought it was my baby son, whom I had never seen. Therefore, I fought all the harder against the usurper Yuri until I drove him and his ant allies southward, rejoined Lilla in Kuana, and learned that the little Q was safe, and that the dead child was but an orphan baby, whom Lilla had substituted for our own baby for fear of just such an outcome." "It was no orphan!" Okapa shrieked. "It was mine! Mine! The dead child was mine. Yuri stabbed my baby, and now I've stabbed him with the self-same dagger. Yuri killed my baby, and I have slain him, and now I must die myself for having killed a king." So saying, her anger spent, she flung herself upon the couch and wept silently, as is the habit of Cupians. Just then the Princess Lilla, in a black gown, swept into the room. "They told me the king wished to see me here," she said. "Where is the king?" She stopped abruptly when she saw the body on the floor. Then her eyes rose until they rested on Miles Cabot. With a glad cry she rushed toward his outstretched arms. But a premonitory shout of "Hands up!" from the doorway caused her to halt. She was between Miles and the door. He still held the jeweled dagger in his hand. Stepping quickly to one side, he cast it straight at Tobo, who stood by the entrance, a rifle in his hands, and before the Cupian soldier could raise the weapon to fire, the missile had penetrated his heart. Down he went with a crash. While this had been going on, Okapa, the madwoman, had crept stealthily towards Yuri's body with a view of securing the rifle which he had dropped. Seizing it, she leaped to her feet with a shriek. "You too!" she cried, pointing at Lilla with one skinny finger. "For it was you who took my babe from the orphanage and exposed him to danger. You are a joint murderer with Yuri. Him I have slain, but now it is your turn." But Miles stepped between her and the princess and wrenched the gun from the poor mad hands, whereat she flung herself upon him, clawing and biting like a demon. It was only the work of a few minutes, however, to get both her wrists behind her back. Lilla, sensing the need, ripped some strips of hanging draperies, and together they tied the woman and seated her to one side. Then once more the long-separated Earthman and his Cupian beloved started to embrace, while Okapa glared at them with baleful eyes. This was too much for Miles. "Just one paraparth," he said, and stepping over to Okapa, he spun her around until she faced the wall. Then he clasped the princess to him in a long embrace. But at last a pang intruded on his bliss. "Lilla, dearest," he said, "where is our little son?" She shook herself together. "I know not," she replied. "They would not let me know, for fear that the usurper, may he rest beyond the waves, might force the secret from me, but our country is more important than our child. While we tarry here, the battle rages. Quick, to the upper levels, and let us take control. We cannot do so without a message from their king, her husband asserted. Let us therefore bring them one. Stooping down, he picked up the dead body of Prince Yuri and flung it across his shoulders. Lead on, he said. As they emerged up a flight of stairs into the main hall of the palace, they saw a frantic throng of palace guards piling tables and chairs and other furniture in a barricade across one of the doorways. Evidently, the troops of Emisol and Ha-Ba-Ba had penetrated the palace and driven the defenders back to this point. The golden curled Lilla, standing straight and slim in her black gown, stopped all this work for fortification with an imperious gesture. Desist, she cried. I, your princess, command it. The war is over. Yuri, the usurper, is dead. Prove it, snarled back the guards like a pack at bay, recoiling from her regal presence. Here is your proof, Miles shouted, stepping forward and casting Yuri's body down before them. Your king is dead. 'Tis true, one replied. The king is dead. Yuri is dead, another echoed. Long live King Q! Long live King Q! Shouted all the palace thugs, just like the besiegers stormed over the barricade with leveled rifles. But at the shouts within and at the sight of their princess and their intrepid Earthman leader, they grounded their arms and, holding their left hands aloft, gave the Perovian greetings. Yahoo, Miles Kabot! Our regent has returned from Minos to rule over us. Then one guardsman had an idea. Come, he said, let us mount to the upper terraces, haul down some yellow pennant of the King Yuri, and restore the red banner of the Q dynasty. From one of the balconies above came a boyish voice. It's already been done, Miles Kabot. Everyone looked up, and there stood Yuri's younger brother, the loyal Prince Turan, wearing an insignia of Admiral of the Cupian Air Navy. I hope you don't mind, Miles, he said as he descended. I made myself admiral on my own hook. You see, while all the bees were here at Koana, bombing your men, I captured the air base at Watusa with a crowd of ex-aviators whom I had assembled for the purpose. We had been hiding in the woods for several sinks when spies at Watusa were informing us that there was an opening. When the time came, we walked right in, killed a few old bees that were on guard, reconditioned the planes which have lain in storage ever since my brother seized the throne, painted them with silver paint, and flew up here to Kuana and put the bees out of business. The silver paint was my own idea, and I must say it seemed to work. The bees couldn't see us at all against the silver sky. The plaza in the fields beyond are strewn with dead and dying Himerians, and my men are tracking down the survivors. And he would have chattered on in his boyish excitement had not one of the soldiers brutally interrupted with, Thy brother lies dead, O Turan. The young prince followed the pointing finger of the guard until his eyes rested on the crumbled body in its blood-stained yellow toga. Then he flung his arm across his face to blot out the sight. For a few moments he stood thus, while all respectfully kept silent. At last he uncovered his eyes and addressed the Earthman. May he rest beyond the waves, he said. I crave the corpse that I might give my brother a decent funeral. He shall be buried with full royal honors, Miles Kabot replied, for he was a brave and regal Cupian, who would have served his country well if his inordinate ambition had not blinded his judgment. My cousin shall have a royal burial, echoed the Princess Lilla. It would be due you, Turan, for your share in the victory, if for no other reason. I appreciate this courtesy more than words can express, Turan replied. The news of the capitulation had rapidly spread, and the huge hall was filling with Cupians from without. Among them came Emisol, Nan-Nan, Ha-Ba-Ba, Oenba, and even Poboleth the philosopher. Warm were the greetings between the friends. But where is our king? Miles asked as soon as he could free himself from all the congratulation. Now it can be told, Poboleth replied. He is safe in the care of my wife, Betha, in our village at Lai. The darling! I shall go to him at once, Lilla announced. And I, too, Miles added. But no, Ha-Ba-Ba interposed, for the populace are already gathering in the stadium and are demanding a speech from the great liberator. So be it, Miles said with a shrug of resignation. Affairs of state cannot wait, even in the presence of the king, it seems. But shall these black-togaed guards be permitted to retain their arms? Emisol asked. Why not? The Earthman replied. Their only crime is they fought loyally for a leader. Besides, this is a free country. One of our grievances against the usurper was he deprived any and all of their rifles. Then to the palace soldiers. Care tenderly for the body of Prince Yuri and lay it out in the state pending our return. Oh, and I almost forgot. There's a crazy woman bound in one of the cellar rooms. Turn her over to Mango of Kuana for incarceration in the Mangul, and under peril of your lives, do not ever permit her to escape. All hail our regent and our most beautiful and beloved princess, shouted the guards, as Miles and Lilla left the palace. A curricle awaited them at the gate. Getting into this, they proceeded at a slow rate through the city and across the plaza toward the stadium, through lanes of cheering Cupians. Prince Toron, Emisol, Hababa, Oyaba, and others in their retinue followed them. The plaza and the fields beyond were strewn with bodies, mostly fragments of the once great race of the Himerians. One of those bees, as they passed, it gave a sign of still possessing some life. A faint whistling noise assailed the antenna of the passing procession. Cabot gave one look in the direction of the sound, then signed the Kirkholes to stop, dismounted, and approached the dying creature. Adjusting the control of the wavelength of bee speech, he sadly said, Portheris, my once friend, whom I made king of the bees, it grieves me to see you lying thus, struck down in a war against my own people. Raising himself feebly, the dying Portheris replied, I bear you no malice, Miles Cabot, and I pray that you bear me none. Although I opposed the war, yet when it came to a fight of race against race, I was loyal to my own, as any honorable individual would have been in under like circumstances. Perhaps it is just as well, for do you not remember that when you were driving the Ant-Men off the face of Cupia, you said, there is no room on any given planet for more than one race of intelligent beings? Now the last Formian is gone, and the last of my own people is gone. May Cupia finally be at peace. It's a sincere wish from an old friend. The huge bee fell back, quivered a moment, and then lay still. Thus died Portheris, the last of the Himerians. May you rest beyond the waves, dear friend, the Earthman murmured as he returned sadly to his car. They found the stadium packed with cheering throngs and gala attire. Everywhere fluttered flags of the Q dynasty. After Lilla had been comfortably seated, and Marshal Ha and the others had arrived, Miles stepped to the transmitter and was about to broadcast some appropriate remarks to the assembled multitude, when an airplane arrived overhead and settled softly into the arena. From the plane there stepped Pobleth, the philosopher, followed by Betha, his dark and beautiful wife. Both were smiling, and Betha held in her arms a baby Cupian. Then Cabot spoke into the microphone. Behold your king. It was the shortest speech he had ever made, and the best. Thus came Q the 13th into his own. There is not much more to tell. Prince Turan retained his self-given title of Admiral of the Air Navy. Hababa was restored to his professorship at the Royal University. Oyaba was promoted to a full professorship. Pobleth, the philosopher, again became Mangol of the Kuana, and his wife was made governess of the infant king. Emsol, the veterinary, was given the title of court physician. Ova, the holy leader, died shortly after this, and Nan was selected by the Great White Lodge as a fit person to re-establish the lost religion publicly throughout Cupia. Miles and Lilla, leaving their friends to reconstruct the capital, departed for a vacation at Luno Castle. Thus ends the story of the adventure of Miles Cabot, the radio man, on his return to the silver planet Venus, as received by the Harvard scientists and myself over a long-distance radio set at my farm at the Chippewaquitic Island, Massachusetts. Ralph Milne Farley. The end.